Welcome back to the Block of the Month series. This is the Arabella Quilt Project, folks. We are on block number 9. We're going to be working on these really cool flying geese units, and we are getting pretty close to wrapping it up, but we still got a bunch of wonderful, fun, easy, and accurate sewing to do. Are you ready? Let's get stitching. Well, welcome back everybody to Sew Well. I am your host, Rob Appell, quilt maker from Stitchin Heaven, and yes, we are working on our Arabella Block of the Month from Prayer Designs, and we're back into the sewing. It's month 9. If you are following along and sewing along, you should be pretty caught up at this point because months 7 and 8 were the building of the units and the construction of the units for the piano keys, which are going to fall in these sections, and then actually are going to be divided up by what we're working on today. We're going to have 12 of these flying geese units here like you're seeing, right? Pretty cool. And then within these, each one's going to have 5 flying geese. They're all made the exact same. And if you look over here on the wall, because I've done a bunch of the pre-sewing, all of the flying geese themselves are the same, which is kind of fun because in this pattern we've had some slight color variations in location per blocks, which is going to really, down the road as I've been studying the pattern here, is going to help a lot of this color exchange and some of the flow through here. And like I was talking about over the last few months, the way that the piano keys kind of colors radiate out from what we're working on today within our flying geese. So it's going to be really cool, really simple. However, flying geese can be made a lot of different ways, and I spoke with the gals over at Prayer Designs before we started this entire series because there are some really cool tips they have for accuracy building. So with your pattern, you've got a worksheet that talks about a couple of their tricks and techniques, and that's how we're going to do it today. But a lot of it refers to the way we sew on to our triangle. So yes, we're going to make these as actual pieces instead of big squares cut down and all of that stuff. So we're going to do a couple of slices and dices here in a moment. But really it's right here, this section 3, the flying geese, on your generic instructions portion. And it all has to do with helping omit or eliminate the bulk up here in this top corner, which really is awesome. So we're going to teach that today in the video as well. And we'll be following along, building out the diagrams right here as you see. So yes, as I was saying, with using of our fabric 2, we cut a bunch of them, right? And then what we did in stacks, or I did in stacks, is I wanted to make sure that we need to cut these so they're going to be basically in half. So we're going to take and make a diagonal slice in one direction on these smaller squares to make right triangles. Okay, and these are used again in all of the sides of our flying geese. So with that being said, we're just going to keep them all in one stack, and orientation will be helpful in a little bit. Now we're going to make technically 4 of them out of every one of our large squares, and we'll sew all of those together today so you can see the tricks repeated. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to lay my square to my body so that I can take a ruler that's larger in both directions, and then I'm going to cut the diagonal. And here's the trick: I like to peel the ruler up instead of sliding it or moving it, so nothing moved here. And then as I go to drop it down, I find my first corner here, and then I drop it onto the second corner, and then I'm going to slice again with a nice sharp rotary blade. And if all goes well, I should have now 4. So the small squares are cut in half, and the large square are cut in 2/4. And then again, what I'm going to do is just take a moment and get myself organized, right? And then let me just do it so we're following our diagrams, right? Now we're going to go ahead and take, and we're going to sew on our first piece. And I did this chain piecing style once I became comfortable with it. So as I go on here to lay on everything, I'm watching this bottom edge, the outside edge, and the corner. And then what I'll do is I go ahead in here, and I still have that 1/4 inch seam allowance set accurately on the machine. And I'm going to go ahead and sew, and I'm going to make sure I sew all the way through that bottom corner, keeping it accurate, okay? And then one of the things I found, we're going to always do all of the right-hand sides first. So really, when I talk about chain piecing, it was easiest for me to lay out in groups. We do have a bunch of these to make. Okay, so just to kind of speed up the sewing process, Just going to organize all of these now. Okay, again, just lining up that edge, bottom edge, corner. And then I kind of like to feed this extra corner in up here top. Kind of acts as a little bit of a bunny tail, if you know that term. And then I'm just going to keep feeding through my triangles. And I did this with all but these last few, so I'd have something to demonstrate here on camera today. For all y'alls. Dana loves it when I say it that way. All right, so now, next step. Well, next step is make sure your iron's getting nice and warm, right? I do need to do that. Set your color key aside. Get yourself all organized here. And now I'm going to go ahead and just cut these free. Use my little thread cutter on the machine to release the chain piecing effect. Okay. And now what I like to do with these, just as the instructions are, and this is what it's really calling for, we're going to press these over so that the long portion of the small triangle is flat. Let me show you. And I like to use the weight of the iron to let this happen. But this is the look we're going for at first. Okay? So with the right sides put on, laying those over, setting your seams. I believe a lot of us have been taught to go in the other direction with our pressing. And I think that that's one of the things that really makes a difference with these. Okay, so you can see I'm just pressing them all as they need to be there. Now for me, I don't believe it says anything about this in the instructions, but what I liked to do is come over here now and I'm just going to trim straight down. You could use a ruler. I'm really getting the bulk out of the way. You see what I'm doing there? Straight down into the base piece. Okay, and now as the next piece lays on, remember, you're watching your corner, the bottom, and the outside edge, and you can see that we're going to sew right over that space we just cut away from. Okay, now I'm starting down at the bottom corner, and I'm going to sew through. And the cool thing about this method, because of the way that the pieces were mathematically created, and then the way that we're sewing them and pressing them and sewing them, we're going to still trim these down, folks. We're going to trim them to 2.5 by 4.5 off of the center point. And let me show you that in a second. And that's going to make these things incredibly accurate. And we want to make sure they're accurate as the individual units like this prior to building them into the rows so that everything is as accurate as possible down the road. I know we all have our own personal levels of precision, and this is one of these projects because it's got batik in it and some really well written instructions that make up for a lot of lesson in bulk management. There's a lot to be learned from this pattern. Oh, and folks, if you haven't heard, I hope it's not too late now that we're in month 9, but we have re-released this at stitchinheaven.com. For next year, 2025, January, we will start sewing on this all together. Now, the fun part for me is I'll already be done. My videos are being made month by month in 24. And so, yeah, we'll keep the videos up for all of you that want to sign up and do it all again. Now that you know we've got these awesome videos available. Okay, I'm now pressing away from center. This time we're going to do it like we probably have all been taught in the past. And again, I just love having this wool pressing mat because I really can now let the weight of the iron and just a moment or two of this transition between units do most of the work for me. Okay. So now what we need to do is trim these down, and I'm going to show you that. Oh, hey, let's not get carried away over here. Okay. Now, I did a lot of these. As a matter of fact, I did all but these 4. And so I started in one way and I found what I think is a better way. So I'm just going to show you directly what I have now considered my better way of doing it. Now, one of the things is I happen to notice I have a 45-degree line or angle marker on my ruler. This is a 45-degree line. So what I'm doing is I'm setting that 45-degree line right along the seam we just created. Now I'm going to look right here on my ruler. I'm going to shift it up just a little bit. What I'm looking for is that right there is the cross at 2 1/4 inches. Excuse me. Yes, 2 1/4. I got concerned. Remember, we're making 2 1/2 by 4 1/2, so 2 1/4 is half of that 4 1/2, which means that's our center point. And by doing it this way, I'm going to only have to shift the ruler one time. So I'm going to trim off what is technically the bottom and the side edge of our flying goose, right? Now I'm going to rotate the block, not the ruler. I'm going to lay it, and I'm just going to find 2 1/2, come down to, whoa, I got lucky, right down here to 4 1/2, okay? And then I'm going to make my second slice. And folks, super easy, super efficient, and I shouldn't brag too much, but that one's like perfect, okay? So at any rate, I had saved all of these with the purple color right in the middle, our fabric color number 8. I'm going to put this right back into the orientation where you see it here before we sew these together. But let me show you those trimming tricks through all 4 of these again, because I found it to be so much more efficient than the way I used to do it. So it's partly about keeping your ruler organized, 45 degree line on seam allowance, 2 1/4 at center, slice, slice, 2 1/2 and a 4 1/2. Okay. Now, the only thing that would make that even more awesome, if you ask me, this is for you show-offs at home. You know I have one of these Martelli mats, and I forget to use it sometimes because of all the other things that are going on. So again, this is the perfect time you would use something like this, right? Because remember, we're rotating the work, the fabric. We're not rotating our tool. So again, now I'm going to find that 45 degree. I'm sliding it down until I see 2 1/4. That looks like I need to move it up just a little bit there. Okay, I hope you can all see that decent. Oh, I should also point out, I'm also making sure I'm past 4 1/2 down here. One of my blocks was a little wonky because of the way I had stitched it, and that made it a little bit more challenging. So do make sure you're going to have enough. Now watch, just lift this, rotate, come back here, 2 1/2 and 4 1/2. And due to some of my sewing and my pressing, I did have a few that have ended up like this. And folks, you've noticed I've omitted the word precision from my shirt. So passionate about this project? Absolutely. 100% precise? Well, we're doing it Rob Appell fashion, right? Even though I'm wearing my Team Tiffany t-shirt through the whole process. It has helped a bit. It's helped me enjoy the precision, but let's not get too carried away, folks. Okay. Everyone's got their own level of precision. I do like the way that works. 2 1/2, 4 1/2. You can see this one's going to be a little close, no problems. Okay. Also gives me a little bit better opportunity to rotate that so it's not totally backhanded or left-handed. Okay. Now that we have that made, however, let's go ahead, okay, and build one of the units as we go. So what I often find is easiest for me, I love working next to my machine this way. So now I'm going to take them and I'm going to put them in the correct orientation, making sure my iron is still turned on over here. And I've been trying to teach this more and more for all of you at home. I like to grab my first 2 pieces, but flip it over so that I'm looking at this unit 2 on the top, because watch what this does for my sewing. I can do, as I should, sew through here. First thing we should pay attention to is as I come through here, that's the tip right there. That seam allowance was the tip of my flying goose. So if I don't want my tips to go missing, I can cheat at that seam allowance, right? I got exactly what I was hoping for there. And what I should be teaching you all to do is stop here and press up into the first piece or away from where we were working so we could add on this next piece. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take my first grouping. Remember, we have 12 of these to make. So the first one, I do all of the parts and pieces, nice and slow and easy. making sure that not only do I understand the instructions, but that everything's coming together nicely, I'm not running into any pitfalls, but then I'll start to pick up the pace. And with these, I will tell you that the ones on the wall, I stitched most of them before going back to the ironing board. Let me show you that here in a second, but let's finish this one off the way maybe our grandmothers would do it. The great quilters of the past. I like to encourage my seams if I have to down there. I am kind of fighting the seam allowance, but it seems to make sense the way I like to sew. Drop that back down there. But because I was also playing a little bit of catch up over the last few months with my sewing, I started to realize there was a couple of different ways we could handle this, right? So one of the things I learned to do is I didn't have to press at every stitching. I could press them all at the end, which I will now show you. I can also, if I stay organized, start to get a little bit of chain piecing going on. You notice I pulled all of the same pieces. I'm going to fold them all over like I described earlier. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take the first two units, or the first two flying gooses, and make a flying geeses. Still watching for my 1/4 inch, nothing like that for accuracy has to change. But what I find is when I'm doing a lot of these blocks, if they're all the same, it's faster for me to build the design once with the fabric and then not have to follow the physical diagram so much, but just looking at the fabric, like the pieces up on the wall there. Just the way my brain works. I work better in color than in black and white, and I work better often with pictures than with words. It's just how I am. Now, the only thing we have to do here, but remember, we're already sewing as we should be, right, is open this up. Let's just confirm everything is running correctly so far, but now we have 3 of them, folks. Isn't that cool? Okay, so now, again, just grab the next round, lay them all on here, and start to chain piece them through. And as we finish putting on that last series of pieces, then I come back on over to the ironing station here onto my wool mat, and I'm going to kind of do from the bottom up, or the flat end of the triangles. And what I want to do at this point is I can warp a little bit. I can take these out of square if I'm not careful. So just make sure that you're extending all of the seam allowance. You're encouraging any seam allowance if you needed to. Let it rest as you start to do the next one. These are going to be in the middle of your piano keys, so there's no seam management right now with our iron that will allow for nesting. It's not going to be part of the next series of the pattern. I've already checked. So as we go through, just letting it all rest nice like this, we're going to set these flying geese units aside, and we're going to do one more block next month for month 10, and then we'll have all of our pieces constructed, and we'll start back in on building the center out, adding in the 3 rounds of borders, and it's going to be just an amazing quilt project. I know we've all had a blast together, a ton of fun, and I'm super excited to let you all know that Stitchin Heaven is doing round 2 on this beautiful Arabella Block of the Month quilt by Wing and Prayer Designs, and of course we'll have the video support all next year and our Facebook groups and all of that kind of stuff. So very blessed to have all of this going on here. Super excited to see you all today. We will be back, like I said, in 1 month with month number 10, the last of the sewing of our blocks. Until then, check out the rest of the channel. We've got all kinds of wonderful how-to tutorials here, live feeds, all kinds of other great stuff going on at stitchinheaven.com. So we will see you real soon. Until then, please stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.